What else? Lilacs. All right. Grilled. All right, things. All right. Anything else? Simple green, yeah. Funny thing, I've enjoyed trapping, and most lures are made with a skunk essence, and I have a lot of fond memories of trapping with my dad and with people, and so when I smell a skunk, most people are like, "Oh, gross," and to me, I'm like, it's kind of got a cool little tinge to it, lots of fond memories there, but anyway, to each their own, right? Yeah, so it says the aroma of the knowledge of Him, of Jesus, everywhere, and so I'm not going to say I'm totally disappointed, but I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping someone was going to say bacon, right? Can we all get behind the fact that bacon? I mean, have you ever walked into your house and someone's been cooking bacon and you're like, "Dang it, that stinking bacon smell again." Does that ever happen? No, no. I would say it's and so my argument for using bacon as my example is it says the aroma of the knowledge of Him everywhere. And bacon doesn't have a bad place to be served, right? It's breakfast, it's lunch, it's dinner. And we're happy to have it all the time. Right? Okay. All right. So it begs the question, how do you make bacon? Any idea? Jen can't answer these questions because we just got done making bacon. What's that? Microwave. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So that's very good. Let me refine the question. How do you make bacon prior to it being bacon? Okay. So we killed the hog, and we cut the pork belly off of it, which is the flank to the first section of ribs. So we got that out of the way. So now we have ourselves a pork belly. How do we make bacon? We still don't have bacon. What do we got to do? What do you think some ingredients in bacon are? Salt. Okay, we have salt. What else do we have? Say it louder. Say it with confidence. Sugar, you betcha. Yes. What else? What else might we want to put in this? What are we doing to the bacon, by the way? Brining it, curing it, yes. So if we're going to brine it, that implies moisture, right? So what else will we need? We need a nitrate, yeah. We could use like a pink salt or a celery juice powder, so we'll throw that in there. What are we throwing this in, by the way? Why a bucket? What else is in there? What are we doing? Stirring what? Water, thank you, yes. So we have to have water. We have to have this medium that we put the salt and the sugar and the nitrate, right? And so if we stopped right there, could we get bacon? If we put it in there, would that be a basis for bacon? It would be. It would be the basis for a brine, right? But we want to have an awesome brine. So if we want to have an awesome brine, what are we going to put in there? Yes, thank you. We're going to put molasses and maple syrup in there, and it's going to get awesome. So that's what we're going to do. And so just because I wrote it down, a brine that's I think is pretty good is water, salt, sugar, celery juice powder, molasses, maple syrup, and pickling spices. That's what you need to make your brine. So we put our pork belly in there, and we're brining it, right? Let's go to Luke chapter 14, verse 34. Luke chapter 14, verse 34. Let me see here. Well, 13:34 definitely doesn't have anything to do with the conversation. All right, it says, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. Now let's go to Mark chapter 9, verse 49 and 50. We'll read that too just real quick. Mark chapter 9, 49 and 50. And it says, everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. All right, so we have these references in the Bible as salt being a beneficial thing. Can we agree on that? It's referencing salt as beneficial. Okay. What is the salt doing when we're brining? It's seasoning it. Yeah, so it's seasoning it, and so, but what's it actually doing? It's preserving it. But like so we took our water and we stirred the salt up in it, and we plunked the pork down in it, right? And where's the salt when we first plunk the bacon in it, or the pork belly in it? It's in the water, right? What did you say? Yes, the salt moves from the water into the meat, right? And so, why do we do that? Why do we put the nitrate and the salt in the meat? And what is preserving do? What is the purpose of a preserve? Well, what does the curing do that's beneficial to what we're trying to do? And so it makes it last. And what does it make it last from? Spoilage, right? So it makes the meat a less desirable place for bad things to live. That's what it's doing, right? And so when we talk about this, what's it take for the salt to get into the meat? Yes, osmosis through time. That's what it takes. So you soak it, right? And you wait for what you put in the water to take effect on the meat. Are we all following along? Right. Okay. So now you're probably saying, what's this have to do with the price of tea in China? I'll get there eventually. But just let's follow along. Like if God is talking about, this saltiness that we're supposed to be, what's he talking about? And he says everyone will be salted. Salt is good. Yes. Yep, I think that's an absolutely appropriate way to look at it. Yes? Yep. Yeah. Yep, have salt among yourselves. And so, if we were going to say that it would be good for us to have spiritual salt put into us, what would be the purpose maybe? Yeah, think about this concept. I think it's a pretty interesting concept. So we want to preserve ourselves, right, against becoming nasty, right? And so what do we want to put in ourselves? The Word of God, okay? What else? How else might we increase this saltiness? I was hoping someone would say, come to Sunday school and banter things around. Like, that's what I was kind of shooting for here. Someone want to throw that out there? Yeah, we could go to Sunday school. We could go to worship service and hear the word preached. And wouldn't we say in this spiritual realm that would increase our saltiness, right? So the first time I made bacon, I tried to make bacon, they were saying at least 7 days. You should soak it in the brine 7 days. And so we decided, well, if 7's good, 13 must be stellar. And when we ate it, it was so potent, salty potent, that you would, if you can use this term with bacon in the same thing, it was bad. It was bad. It was really, really super salty. And so it got me to thinking, like, is there such a thing as a Christian in a positive frame that's too salty? But I mean, just in a positive realm, if we're just looking at the positive effects of salt, could you be too salty? You think so? And maybe I'm not presenting it this way. Like, if salt was all goodness, all purity, and all holiness, would there be such a thing as being too salty? There wouldn't, would there? And so, and I'm kind of like confusing the situation because I'm saying the 13 days was too much salt. But my point is the longer you left it in there, the saltier it got. And so theoretically, the more time we spend in the Word, in prayer, and in fellowship with each other, the more salty we should get, which is a positive thing as we look at it as being Christ-like, right? We want to be more Christ-like. We'll say the more salt, the more Christ-like we are. And it's a positive thing. And once again, what does it take to get the salt into the meat? Time. What's it take to get Christ-like principles into people? Okay, now, what did it say the salt wasn't fit for what? In Luke, it was saying the salt wasn't fit for where? Basically anywhere, the soil or the manure pile, right? Now, let's just think about this. This is what's been on my mind. This is, I think, an issue for Christians. If I took this pork belly and I soaked it 1 day in the brine, and what do we got going in the brine? We got salt, we got syrup, we got molasses, it's awesome, right? 1 day in the brine. But then I took it out and I marched it out to the back of my barn while I stack up all the poop and straw, and I buried it in there for 6 days. And then I got it back out after those 6 days, and I dipped it in the brine for 1 more day. And then I decided to make bacon. What would my bacon taste like? Let's just spitball here a little bit. It might taste like manure, wouldn't it? It just might. It just might. The influence of the manure might be greater than the influence of all the other items, even though I'd put them in the items, right? What's the difference? The time. I agree, the time. So let's go to Colossians chapter 4, verse 2 through 6. Colossians chapter 4. It says this, verses 2 through 6, chapter 4. Devote yourselves to prayer, being watchful and thankful. And pray for us, too, that God may open a door for our message, so that we may proclaim the mystery of Christ, for which I am in chains. Pray that I may proclaim it clearly as I should. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So my question is when you interact with people, what is the aroma that you're giving off? It's not a rhetorical question. I want to hear some feedback. Okay, hopefully not. All right. But what is it? Okay. And I agree with you, Jim, but let's narrow it down. So, like cops like to tell stories, right? But cops don't tell stories about, well, if a cop was to see a drunk driver and decide to maybe stop him, and that person might possibly be drunk, they might arrest him and the fight might happen, right? That's not how we tell a story. We say, well, this one time I saw a guy, he looked drunk, so I stopped him and he wanted to fight and I fought him. That's what makes the story entertaining, is because it's relating a personal experience that you had, and you're living it, right? And other cops are inspired, and young people think it's interesting, and they make TV shows about it, and people watch it, and they think it's kind of fun to watch and all those things, but it's because of personal experiences. And so what I want to hear from you is, in the last week of an experience, good or bad, about this interaction that you had with somebody. Because I think that's what we need to do as Christians is like, theoretically, it would be good if we witness to people, right? We can all agree on that. But if we never do it, is it relevant to the discussion at all? Is it? Other than it's something that we should do. But if we never do it, you know how we could lose steam? So I want to hear it. I want to hear an interaction that someone had in the last month, let's say month. Just like anything. Uh-huh. Well, Jim, you're kind of intimidating. You're kind of intimidating. Even if they disagree, I doubt someone throws them. No, I'm just joking. That's good. So you stood up in front and boldly proclaimed the truth in the Bible to over 100 people. That's awesome. Yeah, you took an opportunity to speak what we know is true. You spoke truth to other people. That's awesome. That's what I like to hear. Now I'm going to give a counter to that, just to lower the bar a little bit. Jen came in for worship service and she's like, "Do you want me to come back and get the kids?" And I was like, "I got it." And at 9:15, I'm like, "Everybody better hurry up because we're going to be late again." And so I'm zipping down the road. I made a mostly stop at Terrace Lake and North Foothills there, and I whipped out in front of somebody, and I got an old truck, and I always forget, like, when you put the hammer down, like, I roll coal, but it's not because it's cool. I roll coal because I got an old truck. And so I rolled coal in front of these people, and I was like, I hope they turn off before I turn into the church, Like, that wasn't the best smell, literally or optically, that I could have done. But, like, just realistically, we have these things that happen in our lives, right? And we should be able to talk about them and be open enough to realize that doesn't disqualify me from later seeing that same person and sharing Christ with them. It doesn't make Christ less true just because, there's a bunch of soot on their windshield right now. That's, you know what I'm saying? But sometimes we feel that way, like in our workplace and different places. We're like, I need to be quiet about Christ because of this, that, or the other thing. And so it's a twofold situation. One, we need to be more careful about the aroma that we put off in public, and two, we have to realize that Christ is as pure and true and right. Yes?
You're still a real person. So if you're perfect all the time, nobody's going to want to relate to you because you can't.
Yep, I agree with that, absolutely. So, anyway, I lowered the bar a little bit. Does anybody else want to share anything?
I've had a few interactions with my boss at work, and none of them are like revolutionary. I usually come back and talk to Nate, and I'm like, oh yeah, that would have been a good thing to say. but recently, he knows that like Nathan's degrees things we've talked about, and so every time he hears like something about Mormonism or something else, he comes and like, did you see this crazy thing? Or, like this new show that's out there? So he'll sit and talk to me in my office. But the last interaction we had was about a couple different religions and just talking about like how they started and how kind of crazy some of the things that they believe are. And he's like, I can't even imagine how anybody could be like could say that they know. He's like, nobody knows what the heck is going on anywhere. You know what I mean? Like about any of this. And I was just like, okay. But we talked about it later, and I was like, oh, I have so many other like things that I said in that moment. But like, there's a lot of little open doors there that he's willing to talk to me about those things, knowing where I'm coming from, and like so. There'll be more things later, I'm sure, where I'll say something fantastic.
Yeah.
But those things,
You're laying that foundation, and that's good. Nace, can I put you half on the spot? Okay, so the question came up, and this guy posed it. How can we know? Basically, he's saying like about like maybe the creation of the world, or is that the kind of like, or God, or
like who God is or what God is.
yeah? Could you give us like maybe 2 points that we could use in a real conversation about how we know God is real and who He is? Would you mind?
Number one, we can know what is true, right? So, just because of the three laws of the three fundamental laws of logic. So, for instance, the law of non-contradiction being the most important of the three in many respects, it says that something can't be both true and false at the same time in the same sense. So, the phrase God exists can't be both true and false. And the law of excluded middle says that it can only be either or. So it's like God either exists or He doesn't. There's no other alternatives. So we can know that the truth that God exists, we can know that it is true, rather, that God exists or doesn't, right? And I would say the arguments, the second part would be arguments for the existence of God. So we can know that it is true that everything that begins has a cause for its existence, right? So we can know that it is true because that's all everyone has ever experienced ever in their entire existence. That all things that have a beginning have something that begins them, right? The universe began to exist. That's what all science points to.
Yeah.
Everyone, whether no matter what age you believe the Earth to be, you know that the universe had a beginning. Even atheists and evolutionists believe this. So, therefore, the universe had a creator, a beginner.
Excellent. Thank you. Awesome. I want to highlight one point in there that I think is really important is the law of non-contradiction. Because I think that applies to so many things in our world today that Christians want to back away from a little bit. Like right now, abortion is a very big deal, right? And so a baby can't be a human being and not a human being in the womb at the same time, right? And so we gotta make sure that we as Christians know which it is, and it's that they're a human being, and they're a human being from the point of conception. And so like there's these things that together as a group we can discuss and have confidence in. Like I'm always way more confident after talking with Pastor Nace about things, because he'll be like, well, read this scripture and read that scripture. I'm like, oh yeah. And I'm like, all right, let's go do it. This is awesome. And that's what we can get together if we're willing to discuss these things. And, it was saying, let your conversation be always full of grace. And so that's also a very important point, is like, as we discuss these things, we don't want to devolve into an argument, right? Like there is points like, what's the sign say out above the door? The 3 points. Yep. Yes, right. So in essentials, there's no room for dual beliefs, right? Like Jesus died on the cross, and he's the only way for us to have salvation, right? The blood of the cross. That's not open for partials or whatever. But yet there's other things that we can say, the Bible doesn't stop with specificity, so we don't have to argue it to a specific point. We can stop short of drawing this line where the Bible didn't draw a line. And I think a lot of the New Testament is filled with that, as they discussed all the laws and Peter saying, I don't want to be defiled, and God saying, don't call things, unclean what I mean. Like there's lots of examples where God doesn't want us to get caught up in these arguments that aren't salvational. So, but I think there's lots of topics in the United States today that are salvational that we're scooching away from. Do you have a...
Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't know, your point that you made about the non-contradiction thing, I think that it's a really good segue into the gospel discussion, because there's so much of that mentality that you can't know if something's true, right? There is no like truth or black and white. Like a friend of mine started helping in a youth group, and like she had to go way back to that, the fact that you can know like some black and white things, like there are truth and not true things, where it's like, oh well, that might be nice for you, but like the whole youth, it was like she had to start there before they could even get to the fact that you could know that there was a God, or that this was the right way to, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, that like even if you start there, that there is things that you can know are true, and like in my line of work, like you better know that some things are true, or else somebody's gonna die.
Right, yeah.
You don't live like things aren't sure, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I don't know. That was like the thing I thought of later, was something I could say to him about like what we do all the time. We act as if there's things that are true, and his statement was kind of like, how can we know that anything's true or right? Like people have all these crazy ideas about all these things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a great point. When I watch paramedics working on someone that's really hurt and they're measuring out medicine, they're never like, well, who knows if this syringe is accurate or not, so who really cares? Let's just go for it. It's very precise, and like they have a guy with a watch that writes down things, and there's a time frame and an amount that matters, and it's exact. And so yes, I think there's lots of places in life where we can say, no, there's absolutes. Yes, Jeff. Yes.
But thank you for this food
Yeah.
that we have that we're blessed with. Yeah, my brother was there and he said that was a good little sermon there, Jeff.
And excellent. You know what? Awesome. That's perfect.
Those I ams, you know, and you know, I'm the light of the world. We're going to shoot off fireworks because I'm the light of the world, and Jesus will,
Yeah.
make the world so much better than what we're going to shoot up today. So the idea there is that I ams have just been really rattling around in my head, and they seem to be really useful in conversations. A statement about that Jesus says about himself. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the gate for the sheep. I'm the resurrection and the life. All of those just with the mind, all of those to speak kind of seems like very naturally in life situations.
That's awesome. See, this is what I love. You know, I've gotten 2 takeaways. So I'm supposed to be up here presenting, and I've got 2 takeaways already, and we're barely halfway through our time together. And so this is how I feel iron sharpens iron. You know, is people of common belief and a common source of knowledge sharing with each other, and it's really cool. So, does anybody have anything to add on where we are so far? Any other stories that we'd like to share? Yes, sir.
To violate the law of non-contradiction, like to say that things can be true for one person and something contradicting can be true for another person, violates what's called the principle of livability. And I think that's what Bethany was getting at. The principle of livability means like there are things that are livable and there are things that are not livable. So if you say with the law of non-contradiction in mind, like say police officer pulls you over for speeding, right? Or for rolling coal. But like
Careless driving. Go ahead.
if you say to the police officer, well, that's your truth, see how that works.
Yeah.
Try it. I dare you to test it, and then get back to me.
Well, you can get back to him after you get your bond posted, probably.
So it's like it just violates the principle of livability.
I really like that. And you know, on that note, I want to bring something else up. And it's kind of a tangent, but it just amazed me. So I was having a discussion with one of the principals at the school down in Ronan, and he's no longer there. I'll just clarify that. But we were talking about the relativeness of truth, and I was saying, really, cannibalism might be okay. And he says, well, you know, Levi, there is this book, and it's called Keep the River on the Right, I think it is, or Keep the River on the Left, one of the two. And it matters because on one side of the river was cannibals, and he was down in the Amazon area, and this guy, have you heard of this? Yeah. So this guy goes into the Amazon and encounters cannibals, and he participates in their rituals, and this cannibalistic tribe goes and captures people and kills them, and he participates in eating them. And in his book, he is making this justification why it's okay for those people to be cannibals. And it created quite an uproar. I think it was in the 70s that he did this. And what he didn't write about, which is equally interesting, is that Christians contacted that tribe. And what was so interesting about them doing this cannibalistic stuff is, so like, I raise sheep, right? And so if someone calls me up and they said, hey, I'd like to have a sheep this fall. Could I buy one and butcher it and eat it? Like, I'm like, yeah. And there's no big uproar and there's no big thing, and it gets harvested and it gets packaged up and it gets eaten. Well, these cannibals would have these seances and these big deals, and they would get in a really weird frame of mind before they would go attack this other tribe and kill their people and get ready to eat them. Like, it was this big mental hurdle that they had to get over. And the other thing they didn't do is they weren't like, hey, we're going to eat you next week, so, but it's cool because we're cannibals. It's no big deal, right? Like, and so I made that point to him. I was like, well, if cannibalism was so cool, why didn't they just raise their own source, right? Like, why didn't they, so I raise my own sheep, and if I want to eat one, no one raises an eyebrow, right? But if I drive over to the neighbors and whack one in the head and eat it, we got a problem, don't we? I mean, right? And so on the same level, if cannibalism's cool, why wouldn't they source from inside the tribe, if that's what they're all about, and the tribe that wasn't down with the eating of human beings, leave them alone, right? Doesn't that seem to make sense logically? And he was like, well, it's just, and I was like, no, what you're saying is, like, if I feel like just going and murdering somebody, if I'm in the Amazon, it's cool. And he's like, that's not what I'm saying. And I'm like, that's totally what you're saying. So the Christians contacted this tribe, and they actually renounced cannibalism, and they talked about how wrong they realized it was. Isn't that interesting? Like, they said, we realized it was wrong, but, traditionally and whatever else was going on, but they overcame that. And they don't do it anymore. It's not like they're down there like, yeehaw, and still doing it. I, however, am still raising and eating sheep. So, that aside. But I saw an article, and it said that, I can't remember if it was a Washington Post or some person is getting torched right now because they wrote an article because they were arguing that cannibalism may be appropriate in some places at some times. And I'm just like, this is insane. Like, if we don't learn from the consequences and the errors of the past, like, dude, the supermarket could turn into a whole new experience if this took root, Like, you don't know if you're coming out there with lunch or as lunch, I mean, it's bad. Yes, Nace, go ahead.
Another thing you can arm yourself with is the knowledge that the cannibalists, like you said, they knew that it was wrong. So much so that they had like this religious seance before the eating of the human meat took place because it made that seance, that religious experience, made the human being not human. So when someone says something like, cannibalism was right for them, right? You can show them that it was not even right for them. Like, it's always wrong in every culture, at every time, in every place to murder.
Yeah, and that's the point is they had to make like this seance thing. They had to come up with an excuse to excuse the wrong that deep down they knew they were doing. And like I said, they outsourced the supply. It's not like they were so cool with it that, yeah, they're like, yeah, eat me next week, whatever, like it wasn't that. So, but anyway, I just thought it was interesting, like, and this was years ago that I was having this argument, and I thought it was just entirely dumb then, and now to see that it's coming back as being floated out there, like, oh, well, maybe sometimes we should eat some people. It's like, no, we should not. And, and so it shows that, like, even though the morality of the United States concerns me, I do feel like, there, at least there is these morals that exist, but I would say, like, they're going like this, and the standard is always here, and they're starting to see, and like, that's the danger, is because, like, if this is the standard of Christ, and someone's like, well, I want to live right here, it's hard for us to say, no, that's not acceptable. And why not? Because most of us are right here, right? And so we don't want to be like, that's not acceptable, because we want to feel okay with ourselves. And then all of a sudden, one of our buddies is like, I think I want to live right here. And then it's like, well, you know what? I think I see Jesus up there, and I think I still see him down there, so let's not say anything. And then pretty soon someone's like, well, he's living down here, And he doesn't seem to be, like in too much trouble, and I don't want to put that much effort into it. So let's live down here, right? And that's how this, right? And so the standard isn't us, the standard's Jesus. And that's what we got to remember. So, back to my bacon. I'm not done with the bacon yet. If you guys were hoping I was done with the bacon, I'm not. We have one more step. So we soaked it in the brine, right? And the salt went into it, and the nitrate went into it. And what's interesting is so when you put the pork belly in there, it's just this floppy, slimy, kind of half gross thing that you're like, man, something better happen with this pretty quick, or it's going to go bad. And you put it in the brine, and then 4.5, 5 days is where we're kind of at as the magic number. You pull it out, and it's crazy because it's firm, and it doesn't have slime on it, and it's just, you can tell it's changed. There's a fundamental change to the muscle and fat of the pork belly. It's interesting. And so what got me to thinking about this is, like, as Christians, we're fundamentally changed when Jesus comes into our life. And it also got me thinking, it says, well, if the salt loses its saltiness, it's not good for anything. And so has anybody left meat in the fridge or, around 5, 6 plus few days, 13? Let's go 13. If you left meat, just meat, in a mostly cool place for 13 days and you went back and discovered it, what would you find? Yeah. You might discover your ER. You don't know. But it'd be gross. It's gross. It's not. And so I think this is so interesting. So, like, I've looked at, this pork belly that's now brined, and it's like, if the salt was taken out of it, if somehow I could manage to take all the salt particles that have worked its way into that meat out, it would be garbage. But it's salty. And I think the point is it's important that the salt remains in it. And I think as Christians, that's where we go wrong, is like, once we start putting the salt into our lives and then we start putting the salt into our community, it's important for the salt to continue to stay in us. If it leaves us, it's bad. That's the whole point. If we all of a sudden decide no more input of salt, no more reading our Bible, no more praying, no more fellowship with Christians, we run a very high risk of losing that saltiness. And what replaces that good preservative? Rot. Yes, absolutely. So then we take this bacon. It's all nice and firm. It's just, you're like, it smells good, and you're like, oh man, I could eat it right now, but it's raw. So you fire up the smoker, and you throw that bad boy on there, and you shut the lid, right? So what are we doing when we're smoking meat? With what? Okay, so the smoke adds a little bit of flavor. It also adds a nitrate, another layer of preservative. What else are we doing? We're cooking it. Yeah, we're cooking it. We're heating it up. We're putting the heat to it, all right? And so what does the nitrates in the smoke and the heat do to the meat? It makes it edible. And why is it edible, Jeff? Right. So the heat kills the potential bad things in it, right? The heat will kill. If we somehow have acquired a bug in it, the heat will kill it, and the nitrates further make it an unappetizing place for other nasty things to get a foothold. It's pretty interesting, isn't it? Especially pork. Yeah, they say pork's a dangerous game to play on a good day. You want to be careful with pork. So we add heat to it. And it makes it even more fortified against rot. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? And so has anybody ever felt like, man, things are heating up in my life, like the stress level's going up? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, then that's the perspective. Yes, I think you're exactly onto something. What's the perspective, Matthew? Yeah.
Trials are not without issue. And that's, in fact, in verse 49, it's talking about being salted with fire. It's talking about trials and tribulations. And the previous verse is talking about hell and damnation.
Yep.
So this is talking about the fact that you're going to be salted with fire. You're going to be you're going to have trials and tribulations in your life. Your life is not devoid of problems or issues or strife.
Mm-hmm.
Then it says, but your purpose is to go into the world and be that salt and share the gospel. Nate says James 1, 1-5.
Do you got it?
I did, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to say read it if you had it.
Sure. We'll skip down to 2. It says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given.
Yeah, awesome. And so this is what's interesting. So you turn the heat on, right? And you start applying that heat, and you watch it, and you wait for that magic number to hit, and then it's done. Then your bacon's done, and you slice it up, and you're ready to rock and roll. You still want to cook it in the pan, just FYI. I don't want to forget that. But this is what's awesome, is God is the master bacon maker, right? Like, he puts that temperature on, and he sticks that probe in old Levi, and Levi's squirming and squealing and crying. Well, let's be realistic, getting mad and yelling, yeah. But he's applying the heat in a way that makes Levi more resistant to rot. All right? That's my first point. Does anybody have any thoughts on that, or anything they would like to share about some heat in their life? All right, yeah, sweet. And you're about to add another one. Yes, very cool. Any?
Issue with my niece. When my sister died last week, and but she didn't inform anybody. She didn't tell me. She didn't tell her brother. Her mother was dead. She found out through her daughter. But she ousted the entire family. That's the issue. But God's going to do what God's going to do.
Yep, and if we can demonstrate love to people even in adversity, that definitely makes an impact. So I just want to point out that this heat in our life is important. It's the final process in refining us into the type of Christian that is useful to God's kingdom. And here's my final point about that is so that, like, you don't have to age pigs at all, right? You can kill them, hang them up, and start cutting them. No effect on the quality of the meat. You just start eating it. So if it was just if I wanted to have that, I wouldn't go through this long process, right? So, but when you bring up bacon, what does everybody say? Yeah, it's awesome. I love bacon. Everybody has a fond bacon story, right? But do you ever really hear people raving about their pork chop experience? I mean, you talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I've had a good pork chop once in a while, And then they're like, but man, this one time, it was ugly. It was just awful, right? Like, people don't get excited over pork chops. That's why we go to all the work to make bacon, is because people get excited over bacon. Now, when you take pork chops, just raw pork, generally speaking, they get influenced by the things in their environment, whether it's the spices in sausage, or it's the marinades that you soak them in, or it's the wild game that you mix it with, right? Like people are like, well, they're not enjoying the pork flavor. They're enjoying what was infused into the pork flavor, right? Now, when you take bacon, it influences everything around it, right? When you put it on a maple donut, there's bacon. When you put bacon in potato salad and you stumble over it, you're not like, oh, is that a hard potato? No, you're like, oh, that's bacon, and you savor it, right? When you put it on pizza, you're like, did the tomato sauce get a little crusty? No, you know it's bacon, and you love it, right? Am I right? Can I get a yes? All right, thank you. Bacon is identifiable in the mix, right? And so here's my final point. At Terrace Lake Community Church, we don't want to be chunks of pork that are soaking in outside influences, right? Because that can be unhealthy. We want to be chunks of bacon that everybody is excited about and that influences everybody that we touch in a positive way. All right? That's really all I got, and we're kind of a few minutes short, but does anybody want to add anything? Yeah, all right, yeah, see? But in all seriousness, like, that's something on my heart, is that we become the kind of potent influence that Christ would want us to be in the community. Not absorbers of society, but flavorers of society. I think that's where the church wants to be. Yes, Harvey? Yep, it does. Knocks some of that oil back. Yep. Reduces the moisture in it. Yes, you're right. Yeah, yep. Yeah, I agree. Knocks the sin back. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Anything else? If not, I'm just going to close in a word of prayer. Anything? Okay. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, I just, well, Lord, I thank you for this fun morning. I thank you for the fellowship that we have here at Terrace Lake Community Church. Lord, and I just pray that you bring others into our community that can enjoy the fellowship and the camaraderie that we have here, Lord. I just pray that you put people in our lives and in our paths and on our hearts that we can share the gospel with, Lord. And I just pray for strength and perseverance for each and every person here, that they can resist the temptations and the trials that are in their lives, Lord, and that they can be drawn closer to you through those experiences. I just pray a hedge of protection on this church and on our church family. And we just thank you for Jesus and the fact that he died